Everyone knew Empress Helena for her devotion to the gods, but the gods did not know her secret. Every night, she would use a hidden passage to the baths beneath the Colosseum and watch the champion gladiator, Lycaon, wash the blood and sweat from his body. She herself said this wasn't desire, so if it wasn't desire, what was it? Rome, 54 BC. The emperor's bedchamber smelled like the dying empire itself, incense, sickness, and despair. The old, frail man lying in the bed was just a shadow of the ruler who once made the world tremble. And at the head of that shadow stood the Empress Helena, as noble and calm as a marble statue. The moral compass of Rome, the symbol of loyalty. From the doorway, Senator Valerius watched the scene with a mixture of disgust and admiration. He was ambitious, clever, and ruthless, waiting for his uncle, the emperor, to die with a predator's patience. But his greatest obstacle was Helena. The people worshipped her, the Senate feared her. When Valerius looked at Helena, he didn't just see a rival. In her ice-cold beauty, her unattainable nobility, he saw a prize he desired even more than the throne. She is the one with the real power in this city, and the only way to take that power is to find the smallest crack in her soul. That night, when the palace fell asleep, the pious mask of Empress Helena fell. The calm expression on her face vanished, replaced by an indescribable pain and a dark determination. She went behind a massive tapestry in her room and activated a secret mechanism no one knew existed. A stone wall slid silently away, revealing a dark, damp passage behind it. Taking a small torch, Helena gathered the hems of her silk dress and stepped into the darkness. The passage led her to the foundations of the Colosseum, to a high, dark alcove overlooking the private baths used only by the best gladiators. This was her secret temple, and soon her ritual would begin. The door to the bath below opened, and the champion, Lycaon, entered, the man who had killed 3 men single-handedly in the arena that day, the Silent Wolf. His muscular body was covered in scars, blood, and sweat. Lycaon slowly descended the marble steps into the pool and submerged himself, burying all the day's savagery, all its death beneath the water. Above, in the shadows, Helena watched him, her heart hammering like a war drum. She held her breath. It was a sin. The Empress of Rome was watching the nakedness of a slave, a barbarian. That it was a sin she couldn't resist. Lycaon's wild, untamed power was the antithesis to her calculated, artificial palace life. She whispered to herself that it was merely curiosity, an effort to understand the nature of power. But she couldn't tear her eyes from the scars, from the tensing muscles. This was her darkest secret. This was her most dangerous ritual. When Helena finished her ritual and returned to her room, her soul found its solace for one more night. But while she was hiding in the shadows, other shadows were watching her. Valerius had secretly entered Helena's chambers that night and found her bed empty. And now he had only one question. Where did the most pious woman in Rome go at night? He turned to his aide. "Follow her," he whispered. "Every step. Find out where she goes, who she meets. Bring me that woman's secret." At that moment, in the bathhouse Helena had long since abandoned, Lycaon emerged from the pool. He looked around. The bath was empty. But then he slowly lifted his head toward the dark alcove where Helena had been hiding just moments before. His eyes locked onto that exact spot, as if he could see through the darkness. There was no surprise, no anger on his face, only the faint shadow of a dangerous, all-knowing smile. Then he turned and disappeared into the darkness. The Empress thought she was the hunter, but perhaps, all along, she had been the prey. Helena couldn't sleep that night. A voice inside her was whispering that she could not continue this dangerous game. The ritual was no longer a comfort. It had become a fear that gnawed at her soul. The next night, she didn't go, nor the night after. She paced in her room like a tiger in a gilded cage, at war with her own desire, her own sin. But the image in her mind would not leave, Lycaon's face. On the third night, she lost the war. Despite her fear, she had to go to that dark passage again. As she made her way to her ritual, Valerius's spy slipped like a shadow into the Empress's empty chambers. He scanned the room with a predator's silence. Just as he was about to give up and leave, the massive tapestry in the corner of the room caught his eye. Unlike the others, the bottom edge of this one had a faint scuff mark on the marble floor, a nearly invisible scratch formed by years of use. The spy slowly lifted the tapestry. On the stone wall behind it, he felt a small button, hidden as the eye of a statue. At the same moment, Helena was again in that dark alcove, watching Lycaon wash below. Tonight's fight had been less bloody. Helena let out a breath of relief. Her eyes were not on the man's muscular body, but on the tired yet defiant expression on his face, visible even under the water. In that face, there was a silent rebellion against the savagery Rome forced upon him. Helena whispered to herself that this wasn't a forbidden desire. It was something deeper. She saw the fire of life that she had forgotten in her own gilded cage, in the stubborn expression on that man's face. Every beat of her heart was filled with both the thrill of this forbidden pleasure and the terror of being caught. Helena knew this ritual would destroy her, but she also knew she couldn't live without it, and this desperation would push her to the same dark passage every night. But what she didn't know was that the door to her secret was now ajar. The spy didn't press the button. Just knowing it was there was enough. He silently left the room and went straight to his master. "The passage is there, my lord," he whispered, "just as you suspected, behind the tapestry." A cruel smile, that of a hunter cornering his prey, appeared on Valerius's face. "Excellent," he said. He turned to his spy. "Now, investigate that tunnel. Find out where it leads and if it has any other entrances. I don't want that woman's secret. I want a map to her secret." Hours later, the spy returned, a look of astonishment on his face. "My lord," he said breathlessly, "the tunnel, it leads to the foundations of the Colosseum, to the Gladiator baths." The smile on Valerius's face grew wider. This was even better than he had expected. The Empress and a gladiator. Just as he was about to stand and declare his victory, the spy continued, "But my lord, there is another entrance to the tunnel, not from the palace, from the old sewer system beneath the city, a forgotten service door that opens directly into the baths." Valerius's smile turned demonic in that instant. He no longer just knew Helena's secret. He now had his own secret door into it, and no one would ever know he was coming. Quick break. These stories can only exist with your support. For more, please subscribe and like. It means everything. Let's continue. Valerius studied the map his spy had brought him, a cruel smile of a chess master on his face. He now knew the geography of Helena's secret. He just had to make the right move at the right time. He was patient. Meanwhile, the war within Helena continued. For several nights, she resisted the pull of that dark passage. But every night, the defiant face of Lycaon would materialize in her mind, calling to her. On the third night, on the eve of the great festival games, she could not resist the fire any longer. "One last time," she whispered to herself, "just to make sure he is alive." On the day of the games, Helena was not in her imperial box, but in her usual hidden alcove. As she listened to the roars, the clash of swords, and the cries of victory from the arena below, her heart hammered in her chest like a trapped bird. She couldn't see the outcome, she could only hear it, and this uncertainty was the worst form of torture. Finally, when the announcer's voice thundered across the arena and roared Lycaon's name, Helena let out a breath of relief. He was alive. For one more day. That night, Lycaon, who descended into the baths, was not as he usually was. His body was covered in new cuts, and his steps faltered. He entered the pool, washing away the blood and sweat. But when he came out of the water, he grew dizzy. He slipped on the marble floor and fell hard, hitting his head. And then he lay motionless. Above, in the shadows, Helena saw the man she yearned for lying motionless. But in that moment, Helena did not see a gladiator. She saw another body, years ago, on a cold battlefield in the muds of Germania, the body of her son, Lucius. She relived the moment she had kept locked in her mind. It was Lucius's first battle. She had sent him off as a commander, but when she went to bring him back, she found a lifeless boy in the mud and blood. From that day on, Helena's soul had died, until months later, during a gladiatorial game she had forced herself to attend to maintain appearances, she saw that young warrior enter the arena. Lycaon, her son's face, her son's eyes, her son's defiant, stubborn spirit. The gods had sent her the ghost of her son. From that day on, this secret ritual had begun. This wasn't desire, it was a mother's way of seeing her son survive every day, of watching him wash away the blood and death, of grieving him, of protecting him from afar. Every ritual was like letting Lucius live for one more day. And now, Lucius was dying before her eyes, all over again. A silent scream tore through Helena. Not again! I will not lose him again. In that moment, the Empress died. In her place, a mother on the edge of madness was born. She forgot the vow she had kept for years. She burst from her hiding place and began to run down the marble steps, towards her son. With her own hands, Helena had just exposed her greatest secret, her greatest weakness, her greatest sin. But they were not alone in the bathhouse that night. Helena knelt beside the unconscious Lycaon. She lifted his bleeding head and, tearing the hem of her own silk dress, began to wrap the wound. "Lucius," she whispered, as tears streamed down her cheeks, "don't be afraid, Mother is here." She was no longer the Empress of Rome, just a mother trying to save her child. Just then, from a dark corner at the other end of the bathhouse, a slow, mocking applause was heard. Helena froze. When she lifted her head, she saw Senator Valerius, holding a torch, looking at her with a triumphant smile. "What a touching scene, Auntie! The saints of Rome in the arms of a gladiator slave. I suspect my uncle the emperor won't quite believe this mother's love story." The game was over, and Valerius had checkmated. Valerius's mocking words echoed off the marble walls of the bathhouse, stabbing into Helena's heart like a shard of ice. He walked slowly toward them, confident in his victory. Behind him, his spy was as silent as a shadow. 1,000 thoughts clashed in Helena's mind. Run, deny, scream, but her body wouldn't move. Her eyes were fixed on Lycaon, lying unconscious in her lap. Her son, the son she could not lose again. His wound was bleeding. His life was hanging by a thread with every passing second. "What a noble act, Auntie," Valerius continued, stopping right in front of them. "The Empress of Rome, soiling her silks to clean the blood of a slave. Tell me, does he repay this devotion in your bed?" His eyes greedily scanned Helena's body, his face showing not just political triumph, but also an obsessive desire. "For years, I've wondered what you are hiding behind those icy walls. It turns out it was the warmth of a barbarian." Helena's blood ran cold at the crude insult, but she couldn't react. Lycaon's life was in this man's hands. Helena looked not at Valerius, but at Lycaon's pale face. In that moment, Rome, the throne, honor, it all lost its meaning. There was only one truth in her mind. She had to keep this boy alive, no matter the costs, even at the cost of her own soul. This was not the decision of an empress. It was the vow of a mother. "What do you want, Valerius?" Helena asked, her voice surprisingly calm. She wasn't crying, she wasn't begging. She was simply sitting down at a negotiation table. Valerius, though momentarily taken aback by this unexpected composure, continued to savor his victory. "My demands are simple. My uncle, the emperor, is already far from this world. For him to spend his last days in peace, he needs to transfer power to someone he trusts.
That person will be me, and you, as his beloved wife, will persuade him to make that decision. You will be my greatest supporter, my most loyal ally before all of Rome."
As Helena listened to his terms, a counterplan was already beginning to form in her mind. But to reach that plan, she first had to survive this storm. She had to stay alive, and more importantly, Lycaon had to stay alive. So she decided to play the role of the helpless, broken woman, exactly what Valerius expected to see. Tears began to stream from her eyes. "All right," she sobbed. "I'll do whatever you want. Just keep this secret, please." Valerius, drunk on his victory and Helena's desperation, took another step toward her. "That's how we'll come to an agreement," he said. He reached out, grabbed Helena's chin, and turned her face to his. His eyes slid from her wet cheeks down to her lips and neck. "But deals must be sealed, Auntie," he whispered. Then, while one hand held her chin tightly, his other hand began to unbuckle the belt beneath his robe. Helena's blood froze. This was not part of the deal. This was a conquest. "Besides," Valerius murmured, his voice thick with lust, "isn't it more fitting for a body defiled by a gladiator to be cleansed by a senator? The sooner we agree, the sooner we can find a physician for your son." Drunk on victory and desire, Valerius failed to notice the critical change in Helena's eyes. Behind the tears, the victim's fear vanished for an instant. In its place came a pure and ice-cold hatred she had never felt before in her life. In that moment, Helena moved. The crying, pleading woman was gone. In her place was a serpent. Before Valerius could even comprehend it, Helena's hand shot out with the speed of a viper to the ornate dagger at his belt. In a single fluid motion she had practiced 1,000 times in her mind while watching the arena, she drew the blade. In the split second that Valerius's eyes widened in shock, Helena plunged the dagger, without hesitation, deep into his side, between his ribs. A choked, pained sound escaped Valerius's lips. He stumbled backward. His eyes, in disbelief, looked down at the blood gushing from his stomach, then back at Helena's face. But he was no longer looking at a weeping woman. He was looking at an executioner, with cold, expressionless eyes. At the other end of the bathhouse, the spy was frozen in terror. This was not part of the plan. As Valerius collapsed to the marble floor, Helena slowly stood up. The bloody dagger was still in her hand. Her dress was stained with Lycaon's blood, and now Valerius's. She was no longer a saint, nor a victim. She was the bloody goddess of this bathhouse, and now she had one last witness. She slowly turned towards the spy, who was trembling in terror. Helena stood before the spy. She looked into his eyes. Her voice was no longer a whisper, but a command as sharp as steel. "You saw," she said. "My nephew tried to assault me. I defended myself." She slowly raised the dagger towards the spy's throat. "If I hear any other story in Rome or anywhere in the world, I will find your family first. Then I will find you. Is that understood?" As the spy darted frantically, Helena lowered the dagger, but she didn't give it to him. She turned, walked back to the still unconscious Lycaon, and pressed the dagger's hilt into his hand, wrapping his fingers around it. "No," she said to herself, her voice like ice. "He saved me. The traitor Valerius attacked the Empress, and the loyal gladiator Lycaon protected her, at the cost of his own life. That is the story." Helena hadn't just become a killer. She was now writing of history, and she was just beginning to write her own truth, in blood. Helena was now alone in the bathhouse, with two bodies, one dead, the other dying. She slowly turned back to Lycaon. All this blood, all this death, was because of his face. But when she looked at that face, she still only saw her son, and she had to finish the bloody game she had started to save him. A few days later, Lycaon opened his eyes in a secret chamber of the palace. His head was bandaged, and his body lay in clean bed linens. He didn't know where he was or how he had gotten there. The door opened, and Empress Helena entered. Lycaon instinctively tried to sit up, but Helena gently stopped him. "Be calm, warrior," she said, her voice weary. "You are safe." The last image in Lycaon's mind was the darkness of the bathhouse and Valerius's mocking face. "What happened?" he asked. "Valerius!" "Valerius dared to assault the Empress," Helena said, her voice like ice. "And you, at the cost of your own life, protected her. All of Rome is speaking of your heroism." Lycaon was confused. It was a lie, he knew. "But why?" he asked. "Why did you save my life?" Helena sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time in weeks, her face was free of that cold, calculating expression. There was only a deep, bone-aching sadness. "Because I couldn't save my son years ago," she said, her voice like a whisper. In that moment, she told Lycaon everything. Her son Lucius, his unbelievable resemblance to him, her nights of secret rituals. "Every time I looked at you, I saw him, his ghost. And that night, in the bathhouse, I couldn't bear to lose you like I lost him." Helena stood up. She put her cold empress mask back on. "I have arranged a ship for you. On it there is more gold than you could ever imagine. You will leave Rome, and you will never return." Lycaon heard that the woman who had saved his life was now sending him into exile. He was free, yes, but this freedom felt not like a blessing, but a farewell. And in that moment, he understood that Helena was sending away not just him, but the last piece of her own soul along with this ship. The story ends a week later, on the highest balcony of the palace. Helena stands alone, looking at the horizon. Below, Rome is as busy as ever, as full of intrigue as ever. But Helena is no longer a part of those games. She is now the game itself. Her eyes are fixed on a small ship leaving the port, sailing out to sea, Lycaon's ship. She watches it until it disappears on the horizon. A single tear rolls down her cheek. It is the last tear she will ever shed for her son, Lucius. When that tear dries on her cheek, the last trace of grief on Helena's face disappears with it. She turns her back and walks into the shadows of the palace. The grieving mother had died that day. All that was left was the strongest, loneliest, and most dangerous woman Rome had ever seen, Empress Helena. Thank you for watching this tragic legend until the very end. If you want more epic stories like Helena's to come, your support is crucial. Please don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Join us in the comments. What do you think was Helena's true sin? Secretly watching a gladiator or becoming a murderer to protect that secret? I can't wait to read your thoughts. See you in the next legend.